The P90 had a lot of hype leading up to its release, with speculation running wild on just how hard it would slap the cheeks of Medium's enemies. The Season 8 hit, despite the fact that the BFR Titan was clearly busted. This was the gun you saw just swarming lobbies in every game mode. Medium players had wanted this for a while, and the P90's reputation from other games no doubt contributed to the hype. And now, the silence is deafening. So, let's dial it back a little. What is the P90? What are its capabilities, strengths, and weaknesses? And how does it stack up to other weapons on medium? At first, this thing looks like a beast. With a bodyshot TTK on medium of 1.13, and on heavy, the P90 blows every other weapon on the medium out of the water, and even comes close to light weapons levels of lethality. Not only that, but this has an ungodly hipfire and an easy to control, if relatively inaccurate, spray pattern. Throw in a 50-round magazine and a 900 RPM fire rate, and it seemed like cheeks were just puckering themselves up in anticipation of the clapping they would receive. So, why have most players dropped the P90? 2 words: damage drop-off. The damage drop-off on the P90 is insanely close, starting at just 10 meters and reaching its maximum at a piddling 20 meters. Now, that on its own wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. After all, we see similar range on the M11 over on the light class, and that weapon is plenty viable all the way up to pro levels. The reason it matters on the P90 and not as much on the M11 is twofold. First, it's on medium and not light. Medium doesn't have the ability to close the gap with a target the way light does. Literally, all of light specializations revolve around closing the distance. And secondly, potentially most importantly, is how incredibly steep the damage fall-off is for the P90. At maximum, the P90 loses a rectum-shattering 62% of its damage. That takes its TTK from 1.13 all the way down to 1.18 seconds. Just as a reminder, the maximum damage fall-off is only 20 meters. Look at this. This is nothing. 20 meters is so close. That's incredibly rough. And to make things worse, the one piece of utility the medium had to enable close range play, the DMAT, was nerfed alongside the release of the P90. Then, on top of that, the game entered a healing meta at the same time, meaning that lower sustained damage that the P90 could provide at medium close range, again, 20 meters and up, could easily be negated. Even if you're on a team running a counter meta dive comp, you as a medium player would still be at a disadvantage compared to a medium running an AKM or the FAMAS, which is already meta. The FAMAS's hipfire is very close to that of the P90, so the ability to just kite a P90 player to oblivion is there, and not difficult to achieve. At just 15 meters, the damage falloff on the P90 is around 31%, which means the TTK is around 1.48 seconds. Which, I'm sure you can tell by looking at this list, is intensely bad. For context, the R357, which is thought of as garbage unless you land your headshots, has a body shot TTK of 1.29, and its damage falloff starts at 27.5 meters, more than double that of the P90. So, while the P90 does have a larger magazine than the FAMAS or the AKM, and double the magazine of the FCAR, it's not going to matter. You will be done and dusted long before you'll get a chance to run through that mag. This leaves the P90 in a spot where it's very good in very specific situations. It will be difficult to reproduce consistently, and very not good in most other situations. And just by the nature of how the medium class works, it's going to be very hard to force fights in the very close quarter ranges the weapon needs to excel, or even compete in. Also, remember the M11? Yeah, that one gun. Even though it has the same damage drop-off range, it only loses 52% of its damage at maximum fall-off. So in addition to having tools to actually close the distance on light, it also has a less severe penalty for being outside of its optimal range, which makes complete and total sense. Why wouldn't it? So for the time being, I do not recommend using the P90. There are certain parts of certain maps like Monaco, Cis Horizon, and Skyway Stadium where you could get more value out of it, but overall, you're going to be better off just sticking with the FAMAS. You'll do better with it at any range over 15 meters, which means that you will do better in about 85 to 90% of all the fights you're going to be taking. If you don't like burst fire and you still want a relatively large magazine, just use the AKM. We saw it getting use at pro level in the major qualifiers, and if it's good enough for them, it's definitely good enough for you. I won't just leave it there though. How then do we polish this festering turd? How can we make the P90 usable? In my eyes, it's pretty simple. You can't increase the damage by even 1 per bullet, or due to the high fire rate and magazine size, the P90 becomes ultra busted. Obviously, since most of this video was ranting about the damage fall off, we addressed that first. I think the first step would be to try reducing the damage loss down to 52%, on par with the M11. This would bring the TTK at 15 meters to 1.42 seconds, and at max range 1.71. Still pretty bad, but not nearly as severe as before. After that, if the P90 still wasn't performing, I would bump the range up to 15 meters before drop-off starts and 25 for max drop-off. I'd be surprised if the P90 still felt weak after those changes, but if it still does, as a last resort, I would further reduce the damage drop-off percentage. By how much would depend on further testing, but yeah, right now the P90 finds itself in a situation where there is really no reason to use it, which is really sad. The P90 is right up my alley, exactly the kind of weapon I like using in most FPSs. I was really looking forward to it, like a lot of other people were, I think. Ember's quite good with this balancing though. Even if it takes them a while to get there, they do eventually get there. Unless it's the MGL-32. Or dual blades. Or spear. Ah, shit.